Chapter 1. Codes for Life. The most common codes and ciphers are in your wallet, and they are used every day. Do you use secret codes? Do you look for and understand strange symbols? Do you send and receive messages that only a few other people can understand? You are probably not a spy, but you certainly use a great number of secret codes, ciphers, symbols, and messages. Everyone does. For example, which of these symbols makes you think of the word stop? Most of these symbols for stop are familiar around the world, but some symbols have different meanings for different people. The colour red might mean stop or danger to some people, but in China it often means let's celebrate. Symbols for ideas like stop are not meant to be secret. Many codes are just shorter or faster ways of explaining other ideas. A stop sign really says, "Please wait here for a moment and look around. Are you sure there are no other cars or people that might cause you to have an accident?" It would take too long to read all this at every corner. Even language is a code. Although you can read the words in this book, you probably could not understand a common word like stop in more than a few languages. Other languages might look like secret codes to you. On the other hand, you may use or invent a new language that older people do not understand. Do you understand the word codes in text messaging? For example, do you understand this message? GR82CU. This is not meant to be secret code, but many people do not understand it. Personal codes. Only your close friends may understand your personal codes, like hand signs, lesson notes, and the special meanings of the clothes you wear. Your clothes often show that you are in a certain mood or belong to a certain group. For example, what does it mean when you wear a t-shirt and jeans? It could be a code to tell other people that you are relaxed. Uniforms are formal clothes that give information about a person's school or job. Among soldiers, a uniform and its decorations give a lot of information about the soldier's position and abilities. A mistake in your choice of clothes is usually just embarrassing, but sometimes it is dangerous. A few years ago, gang members killed a young man in Los Angeles while he walked in the wrong part of the city wearing a red jacket. Red was the colour of another gang. Each gang painted symbols on local buildings to mark their space. This was another kind of code, but the young man probably could not understand their meaning or the danger he was in. Money and prices. But the most common codes and ciphers are in your wallet, and they are used every day. Most paper money and bank cards include one or more code numbers to try to stop people printing or stealing money. Secret codes are also used on almost everything you buy. Barcodes can be read by computer. They give information about the product, including its name and how much it costs. Two shops can use the same barcode on the same product, but decide to price it differently. Long before computers, though, there were other ways to hide information about prices. Shop managers sometimes used an easy-to-remember 10-letter word like background to write the cost of products. The letters in background represented the numbers 0 to 9. For example, the manager of a carpet shop could write the 4 letters URAD on a carpet, to show that it cost him £75.19. When a customer came into the shop, the manager could look at the code and start to discuss the price. The shop manager knew exactly what he could afford to charge. Simple ciphers. Each letter or symbol in a simple cipher represents a different letter. In the simplest cipher, each of the 26 letters in the English alphabet represents a different letter, like the next letter. In this example, the letters are listed from the last to the first. The message, "Do you have a secret for me?" becomes WL, BLF, SZEV, Z, HVXIVG, ULINV. But cipher breakers might guess that single-letter words in the ciphered message are either A or I. They might also guess that two-letter pairs are common words like or, as, do, of, or to. To make the cipher more difficult, you can run the letters together. WBLF, SZEVZHVXIVGULINV. Or you can break them into groups of 4 letters each. WLBL, FSZE, VZHV, XIVG, ULINV. Instead of letters, you can use numbers or symbols. You can write 1 for A, 2 for B, to make the message 9, 8, 1, 22, 5, 1, 19, 5, 3, 18, 5, 20, 6, 15, 18, 25, 15, 21. Your friends will be able to decipher the message as, "I have a secret for you." By adding spaces and a capital letter, they will have the true message, "I have a secret for you." Another kind of cipher is shown below. You write the numbers, symbols, or letters in rows from left to right, with empty squares for spaces. Then you write the letters from top to bottom, so the message becomes IEEY CFOHAROUA ERVST. To make it more difficult, you can agree that your friend will change the order of the columns from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 5, 3, 4, 1, 2. So the message becomes VST HAROU AERIEE YCFO. The Vigenère cipher. Although these ciphers seem hard to understand at first, a patient enemy could break them quite easily. A Frenchman, Blaise de Vigenère, invented the next big step in code making in the 1500s. Vigenère used rows of alphabets. Each row started with a new letter. This part of the cipher was not a secret. The secret part was a code word, like smile. After you choose your code word, you can start to write your message in cipher. Find the column headed by the first letter of your message and move straight down to the place where the column meets the row that begins with S, the first letter of smile. That is your first letter. The next letter comes from the row that starts with M. Vigenère's cipher looked like the one on the next page. The message, "I will not tell," using smile as the code word, looks like this. Code word SMILE SMILESM. Sentence, "I will not tell." Cipher text, AIQWP FABEIDX. It took a long time to write a message in the Vigenère cipher, but it was very difficult to decipher. It is useful that a letter like L in the sentence above is represented by 4 different letters. That makes it difficult to find the solution unless you know or can guess the code word. But this was also an important weakness of the Vigenère cipher. People often chose words that were easy to remember. If you knew enough about the person, then you would probably guess that his or her secret code word was the name of a friend, a family member, a hero, a place, or even a hobby. Like all secret codes and ciphers, the Vigenère cipher was only as good as the people who knew it. If one person was forced to share the secret code word, then the cipher was easy to break. Chapter 2. War Secrets. Many of history's secret codes and ciphers and the ways of breaking them have probably been lost. Companies keep business secrets. People like to keep personal secrets. But some of the world's most important secrets are about war. When countries decide to fight each other, it is always important for them to keep their plans secret. During a war, soldiers also need to share their plans in secret. To keep secrets, governments and armies need codes and ciphers that are easy to use but hard to break. But they also need to understand the many ways of breaking enemy codes and ciphers. Breaking the Vigenère cipher. Many people thought that the Vigenère cipher was unbreakable. It was used for 300 years, before the English scientist Charles Babbage discovered how to break it. But he never told anyone about his secret method. Or did he? Some people believe that he told the British government. From 1854 to 1856, the Ottomans in the area that is now Turkey, Britain, France, and Austria fought in the Crimean War against Russia. The war started after Russia sent part of its army to Turkey. Thousands of soldiers fought around the area of the Black Sea in southern Russia. The Russians used the Vigenère cipher and lost the war. Perhaps their enemies were able to break the cipher and read their messages. Many of history's secret codes and ciphers and the ways of breaking them have probably been lost. After a war, no government wants to share this information. The codes may be needed again. But people did not mind writing about them when both sides knew that they had been broken. An early war cipher. One of the first records of the use of a secret cipher in war was in Greece. About 2,400 years ago, soldiers in the Spartan army stretched a long piece of paper around a stick. Then they wrote the letters of a message along the length of the stick. When the paper was taken off, the letters were in an odd order. The letters seemed to make no sense. Spartan soldiers hid these messages around their waist, under their belts. If they could not escape from an enemy, they would destroy the paper. Even if enemy soldiers found the paper, they needed to stretch the paper around the same size stick to understand the message. Caesar's cipher. A little more than 2,000 years ago, the Roman leader Julius Caesar invented another cipher. Caesar needed to send messages to his soldiers, but wanted to make sure that no one could read them easily. He developed a simple cipher in which letters of the alphabet were moved a few letters forward. For example, this type of cipher was very easy to break. The enemy simply had to try each of the 25 letters after A as the starting letter. But Caesar probably did not care for two reasons. First, most of his enemies could not read or write, but they might recognize a few words if a simple cipher was not used. And second, most of his messages were probably only important for a short time. By the time Caesar's enemies understood a message, it was too late for them to do anything about it. A more complicated cipher is an arrangement of letters in a different order. But this cipher still has problems. When you look at a message, you will notice that some letters appear more often than others. In English, E is the most common letter. Also, messages need more than just words. What is the difference between these two messages? Kill the king. Kill the king? One message is a command to kill the king, and the other asks, should someone kill the king? So it is useful to add these symbols: question mark, exclamation mark, comma, full stop, colon, semicolon. It is also useful to include the numbers 0 to 9 as part of a cipher. If some words are used often, then they can also have their own code. For example, if an army often uses a word like submarine, then it may want to invent a special word or symbol for it. Often ciphers contain letters that do not mean anything. These can be used in two ways. Messages are often written with no breaks between the letters. The soldiers are nowhere. But what two meanings could this message have? It makes a difference where you put the spaces between words. If you put them before the first S, A, and N, the message says, "The soldiers are nowhere." But if you put them before the first S, A, N, and the H, the message says something quite different. The soldiers are now here. For this reason, you can add extra symbols, numbers, or letters to show where the spaces should go. These extra symbols are also sometimes added to confuse someone trying to read the code. If you and the other person know that the "and" sign means nothing, you can use it and a few other odd symbols to break up words. You can also use wrong spellings to make it harder to decipher. Waving flags. More than 2,000 years ago, Greek and Roman armies used lights and flags to send messages. One message could be sent to many different people. If the signals were in code or cipher, an army could send different messages to its soldiers right in front of their enemies. But both lights and flags could only be seen over short distances. Around the year 1600, the telescope became popular and let people send and receive messages over greater distances. Before radio, it was difficult to send and receive messages on a ship, especially during wartime. Ships used many kinds of flags to share information or give orders. The most famous flag message was a 9-word code ordered by Horatio Nelson before he fought at Trafalgar in 1805. England expects that every man will do his duty. These flags are still used, especially when a ship's radio does not work. They include flags to show that someone on the ship is ill, that someone has fallen into the ocean, and that the ship will soon leave or arrive at a port. Flag messages are still often used as decorations, and there are different flags for each letter of the alphabet to spell out messages. People became very quick at sending flag messages, but it was not fast enough. A faster way was to use semaphore. Semaphore flags let people spell messages using the letters of the alphabet. Some letters are also used to signal numbers and mistakes. The flags are usually square and in two colours. On land, the flags are usually red and white. On the ocean, the flags are usually red and yellow. They are held like the hands of a clock, and there are 7 positions for each flag. The wrong message. Not all secret messages are meant for your friends. Sometimes an army or group of soldiers will send a false message. Often these false messages help to discover what the enemy knows or is doing. During World War II, Americans believed that the Japanese were going to send their ships to attack Midway Island or Alaska in June 1942. The Americans already knew the Japanese ciphers, and the Japanese had communicated about an attack in their secret messages. But the Japanese messages did not say where they were going to attack. To find out, the Americans sent a message using an old code, one they knew that the Japanese had already broken. The message said that Midway Island's water treatment plant was not working. Soon the Japanese began sending messages about the need for water on Midway Island. They were worried that there would not be enough water for their army after they made their surprise attack. The Americans listened to these radio messages and knew that the Japanese planned to attack Midway Island. They sent their ships to Midway and destroyed Japan's ships and planes. Chapter 3. A Queen's Mistake. Instead of helping Mary, Elizabeth sent her to a country house. Mary was forced to stay there. She was Elizabeth's prisoner. The sad story of Mary, Queen of Scots, shows that it is not always an advantage in life to be royal or to be skilled in the use of codes. Mary's father was King James V of Scotland. His wife was French, and Mary was born in 1542. Mary's father died when she was just 6 days old, and when she was a year old, she became Queen of the Scots. At 5 years old, she was sent to France. It was not safe for her in Scotland. England's King Henry VIII wanted to take Scotland, and he began to attack the country. At the age of 15, Mary married Francis, son of the King of France, but he died 2 years later, and she returned to Scotland. Her next marriage was to her Scottish cousin, Henry Stuart, and they had 1 child, a son. But Stuart made many enemies. These enemies tried to kill him once and failed. The second time, they were successful. Most people thought that one of Stuart's killers was Lord Bothwell. 2 queens. A few months later, Mary married Lord Bothwell. But other lords were angered by his new position, and Mary ran away to England to ask for help from her cousin, Elizabeth I. Elizabeth was worried, though, about Mary's Catholic religion. England's kings and queens had also followed the Catholic religion until Elizabeth's father, Henry VIII, had made England a Protestant country. So many English Catholics wanted Mary to be Queen of England, not Elizabeth. Instead of helping Mary, Elizabeth sent her to a country house. Mary was forced to stay there. She was Elizabeth's prisoner. Mary was not punished in any way, and even had servants to help her, But she could not travel or have visitors without Elizabeth's permission. Years passed, and Mary began to understand that she would die as a prisoner. Still, she had some hope. The Catholic King of Spain, Philip II, was ready to attack England after Elizabeth died. French armies also wanted to attack England, but were afraid of Elizabeth. And there were many people in England who did not want Elizabeth to be their queen. Both Mary and Elizabeth heard news about these unhappy people from their own spies. The kings and queens of England had had spies since 1324, when King Edward II ordered all letters to or from England to be opened and read. A royal cipher. Mary had a special way to get news from her friends and supporters. Every few days, Gilbert Gifford delivered beer to the house where Mary stayed. He left full beer containers and picked up the empty ones. But they were not completely empty. Both the full containers and the empty ones often had secret notes hidden in them. Mary's servants put one message inside a container and took another out. Gifford's job was to deliver the messages between Mary and her spy, Anthony Babington. Babington had many contacts among important people who wanted to kill Elizabeth. But he and Mary both knew they had to be careful. If anyone found the messages, then Babington would certainly be killed. Even Mary might be killed. Instead of writing in plain English, Mary used her own personal secret cipher. Mary's cipher used numbers and symbols for 23 letters of the alphabet. There were no symbols for J, V, or W. There were also symbols that meant nothing. These could be used between words as spaces, or just to confuse anyone reading the message. Mary also had 24 other symbols that were used as codes for her name and for common words, and one symbol to show double letters. Mary thought that no one would find her secret messages, but she was wrong. She also thought that if anyone found the messages, then they would not be able to read her secret cipher. But she was wrong again. Gilbert Gifford was really working for Elizabeth's secretary, Sir Francis Walsingham. Walsingham wanted to get rid of Mary, but knew that Elizabeth was afraid of killing a Catholic queen. She thought it would anger other Catholic kings and queens, and perhaps start a war with the rest of Europe. She was also afraid that Elizabeth's own people would not like it, and would fight against her. Walsingham needed clear information to show that Mary wanted to kill Elizabeth, and he found it in the secret letters. The final message. When Gifford received a letter from Mary, he gave it to Walsingham before he gave it to Babington. Walsingham gave it to Thomas Philippes, a language specialist. Philippes was good at breaking secret ciphers. He copied the message, and he and his team started working on it. Each letter was quickly returned to Gifford so he could give it to Babington. It was important that Mary and Babington should not notice an unusual delay. Philippes studied the ciphered messages using a method developed by an Arab codebreaker named Abu Yusuf al-Kindi. When al-Kindi looked at different languages, he discovered that some letters were used much more than others. In English, the order of the most common letters is E, T, A, O, I, N, S, H, R, D, L, U. The letter E usually appears about 13 times in 100 letters. The least common letter, Z, only appears once. Philippes quickly deciphered the message by finding some letters and guessing at others. Soon Walsingham could read everything that Mary and Babington wrote. Babington explained his plans to kill Queen Elizabeth, as well as Walsingham and others. Mary wrote back and said she understood. This was the message Walsingham was waiting for. But Babington wrote about 6 other men who would help him. Walsingham wanted to know their names too. Walsingham asked Philippes to add a few sentences to the letter before Gifford gave it to Babington. Philippes used Mary's code and copied her handwriting. In the new message, Philippes asked Babington for the names of the other 6 men. Perhaps Babington knew that something was wrong. He tried to leave England for Spain, but was taken prisoner. He and 12 other men were hanged. The next year, Mary was taken to a special court. At first, she was calm and said she knew nothing about the plans to kill Elizabeth or to invite the Spanish king to attack England. But then the court showed Mary her own letters, and she could not deny it. At the age of 44, Mary had her head cut off. A secret diary. Many other people have used personal ciphers for different reasons. One famous cipher was used by Samuel Pepys. His cousin got him a job in the government in London. Pepys was intelligent and a hard worker, and he was soon given better and better jobs. In time, he became a friend of the King of England, Charles II. Pepys was a witness to many exciting events in the history of England, like the Great Fire of London. During this fire, much of the city burned down. In 1659, Pepys was 27 years old, and he decided to start writing a diary. He wrote his diary in a cipher so others could not read it, especially his wife. He used different symbols, and he also mixed words from English, French, and Portuguese as a kind of a code. Pepys wrote for himself and not for a newspaper or because he wanted to sell his diary in bookshops. So he did not try to make things sound better or worse than they really were. Today, Pepys' diaries give us a clear picture of an important time in English history. Remembering ciphers. Pepys' cipher was common when he lived, but after he died in 1703, his diaries were not read for more than 100 years. By then, no one remembered the cipher. Finally, in 1819, a man named Thomas Shelton spent 3 years deciphering the diaries. Sadly, he did not know that the cipher key was in another book on a bookshelf above the diaries. A big problem with ciphers is teaching people how to understand and remember them. Until 1915, the Russian army used an old cipher that was easy to break because poorly trained Russian soldiers could not remember newer ciphers. The Chinese general Sun Tzu had faced the same problem 2,500 years earlier. He used the first 40 words of a poem. After soldiers learned the poem, it was easy to teach them that each word in the poem was a code word for something else. Mistakes. The stories of Mary, Queen of Scots, Samuel Pepys, and the Russians show how one cannot always be confident about secret codes and ciphers. Mary believed that no one would ever discover the secret of her royal cipher. She knew enough to use a secret cipher, but not enough to understand that it could be broken. That mistake cost her her life. Mary's cipher did not protect her because she did not know the people who worked with her well enough. It was easy for one so-called friend to work with her enemies. Samuel Pepys had the opposite problem. He wrote in cipher only to stop his wife from reading about his private life. When he left directions to give his books to Cambridge University, he wanted someone to read his diaries, but the diaries were almost lost and forgotten. It is hard to understand the Russian army's use of an old cipher that they knew their enemies could decipher. Why did they not develop a new cipher or code? No one will ever know.